Hey, this is Mr. Ward. I'm making a quick video key for Do Now 14.1. So, who am I? I am the key. Okay, so the first thing says prove it. Prove that angle 4, prove that angle 5 is congruent to angle 6. So here's angle 5 and here's angle 6. We know that angle 4 is congruent to angle 6. Okay, so how are we going to prove that angle 5 is congruent to angle 6? Well, here's what we can do. So if we know that angle 4 and angle 6 are congruent, okay, then that means, and we know that, so what we had to do is figure out, is angle 4 congruent to angle 5? Because if we can prove that, then by transitive property, we'll prove that angle 5 is congruent to angle 6. So we can start by proving angle 4. So we can, angle 4 will be congruent to angle 5. You can use the vertical angle theorem if you've got to chapter 2.8, but if you haven't, then you should just use the fact that this here is 180 degrees, and this is also 180 degrees, and so you have two angles that are supplementary to the same angle, and so therefore they are congruent. Okay, so we can say angle 4 and angle 5 are sup to the same angle and therefore congruent. Okay, and if that's true, then then we do the given. Okay, given that angle 4 is congruent to angle 6 and angle 4 is congruent to angle 5, okay, by transitive property, we can prove that angle 5 is congruent to angle 6. All right, let's go on to the next one. So we've got this situation we're supposed to prove. So I always like to draw pictures on here. So we know angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So I'm going to mark this up. So there's angle 1 and angle 3, and I'll put them a little mark that says they are congruent like that. Cool. So those are congruent. We know angle 2 is supplementary to angle 3. Okay, well, supplementary to angle 3, you've got, if an angle is supplemental to an angle that's congruent to another angle, then it's supplemental to the other angle as well. So we also know that angle 2, let me back up. So we know angle 2 is supplemental to 3 because that, I'm sorry, let me back up. This is what we're supposed to prove. That's what we're supposed to prove. So let me back up. So we can prove that angle 2 is supplemental to angle 1. Okay, angle 2 sup to angle 1 because of the straight angle. Okay, and if that's the case, then we can say that angle 2 is sup to angle 3 because an angle that is sup, let me back up, let's say. Okay, so what I want to say is angle 2 is supplementary to this one, and this one is congruent. So an angle that is supplementary to congruent angles is supplementary to both of those angles. So it's basically reversing the supplementary angles. So, okay, because it is sup to congruent. Okay, like that. So angle 2 is supplementary to angle 3 because it is supplementary to a congruent angle. Okay, now number 3, we're supposed to prove this. So we know angle V is congruent to YRX. So let's label that. So here's angle V, and there's YRX. So we're saying that these are congruent. So I'll make a little mark for those. We also know that angle Y here, I'm going to use a different color for that. Okay, I'm going to use a different color. Okay. We'll use Y will be this pink one, and TRV is this one. So we're saying this is congruent to this, and this is congruent to that. We want to prove that V is congruent to the V is congruent to Y. Well, we can prove either, if you've gotten to chapter 2.8, we can prove that angle TRV and angle YRX are congruent by being vertical angles, or we can prove that those two are congruent. We can prove that these two here, let me back that up because I'm drawing very badly here. Okay, these two right here are congruent because they are supplemental to the same angle. So because this makes a straight angle and this makes a straight angle, we could go this way. There's this same angle that they're both supplementary to, and so they are congruent. So I'll say that angle YRX is congruent to angle TRV because they are sup to the same angle. Okay, so we know that. And if that's the case, then we can say angle V is congruent to angle Y because they are both congruent, I should say, to congruent angles. Okay, and this is by the transitive property. Okay, let's go on to number 4. Number 4, we know that GD bisects CBE. Okay, and because it bisects that, so we know that CBE has been bisected. Because of that, we know that this angle is congruent to this angle. We're supposed to figure out, is angle 1 congruent to angle 2? Well, what we need to now prove is this overall thing, I'm going to just draw this out here, is this congruent to this? In fact, we can prove that this angle ABF is congruent to CBE. Okay, so we can prove that. Okay, so after the givens, we can prove that angle ABF is congruent to angle CBE because of vertical angles theorem, if you've gone to 2.8, or you can say because they are sup to the same angle, which is the proof of the vertical angles theorem. You know, they're both sup to this angle or to this angle. They're supplementary to that. Okay, and because of that, we now know, we know that this angle, we can also prove that angle 3 and angle 1 are congruent by vertical angles or by that. Okay, we could then say angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, okay, by same reason. Okay, there's a couple ways to do it. This first one, we can go on and prove it by then saying, okay, this bisects ABF, but I actually think that we can't automatically prove it. There to be a couple of steps. So I think that the easier proof, I'm going to back off on that, backing off on that approach. The easier one is this, okay, is that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 because both are sup to the same angle. Both are sup to the same angle and therefore congruent. Okay, so once we've determined that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, we can prove that angle 2 and angle 3 are congruent. So angle 2 and angle 3 are congruent because of definition of angle bisection. Okay, and then we can prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Oops. Didn't end up in the right place. So there we go. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 by transitive property. Okay, I hope that has clarified that a little bit. I'm going to stop sharing.